on Friday, your life is normal. And then on Saturday, you're responsible for injecting precisely calculated doses of a lethal drug, insulin, into your kid or yourself if you're diagnosed, 20 times a day. And if you get it wrong, she falls into a coma.
This is Enable, the Disability Podcast, where we'll share stories, experiences, support, resources, and more for people with disabilities and different abilities. We are at Enable Podcast on social media. My name is Jeff Herbert.
And my name is Kurt Hauer. We're talking with Sam Glassenberg, a video game developer who created an app to help families manage diabetes. Thank you for joining us.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Sam, how did your family react when your daughter was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes?
How do I put this? The new patient experience for type 1 diabetes is especially badly designed. So in our experience, so I was driving home from work one Friday and my wife called me and she basically said like, "Hey, just got back from the pediatrician. Our daughter has diabetes. Meet us at the emergency room at the children's hospital." I really had no idea what that meant. Basically, what happens is on Friday, your life is normal. And then on Saturday, you're responsible for injecting precisely calculated doses of a lethal drug, insulin, into your kid or yourself if you're diagnosed, 20 times a day. And if you get it wrong, she falls into a coma. And basically, you're in the hospital for, I mean, in our case, like 48 hours because we caught it early. She wasn't in DKA. She didn't need to spend a lot of time in the ER. So we were out in 48 hours, and then you're on your own.
That's pretty scary.
Yeah, no, it's kind of nuts. And basically, you eventually learn how to manage this disease. It takes, I mean, in our case, I really didn't feel confident until I was about 6 months in. Um, you learn it through play. You learn it through trial and error. You learn it by making mistakes on yourself or somebody you love, which is a terrible state of being, and one that I became very determined to fix.
Wow. Well, I am a type 2 diabetic, and I have devices. I have a monitor and a pump. And today they actually communicate and kind of keep me in that sweet spot. But I'm curious, in your daughter's case, what kind of treatments or diet or technology are required to keep her stable?
Right. So type 1 and type 2 diabetes are really very different diseases, even though they go by the same name. Type 2 diabetes, often happens later in life. Your body becomes more resistant to the insulin that your pancreas is producing. So you basically need to augment it with treatments, or in your case, like with insulin to give you, more because your body's not producing enough. With type 1 diabetes, what used to be known as juvenile diabetes, that's the one where your immune system attacks your pancreas and basically your islet cells are dead. Like your body is producing zero insulin. And now, as the parent, the caregiver, or the individual, you are now your pancreas. So, this organ that was very, very carefully secreting insulin to keep your glucose levels in this very, very tight range to keep you healthy, is now not working at all anymore. And so, keeping in that tight range becomes your responsibility. And it's very tricky. You basically want to keep your blood glucose, normal humans walking around with a blood glucose probably between 70 and 100. With type 1 diabetes, you're usually trying to keep it between 70 and 180. But you've got to remember that, like with a kid, the difference between 70 and 180 is like 3 Skittles. Like it can actually be a very small amount of food will swing you out. And so you need to inject insulin, which helps your body absorb the glucose. But if you put in too much insulin, your blood sugar drops below 70, which can be very dangerous. If you drop below 50, you can, end up unconscious or worse. And then if you spend too much time above 180, it causes, long-term organ damage. So it's this like I use the example of Flappy Bird. You know the game Flappy Bird where you have this, like, suicidal bird that's trying to kill itself and you gotta, like, keep it in this tiny it's, like, impossible to play. The reason it became so popular is because it's impossible to that's what type 1 diabetes feels like. You're trying to keep in this narrow range, which is basically impossible to do, using, you know, trying to compete against the body, which is exercising and eating foods that digest at different speeds, and you're injecting insulin, which is a pretty blunt instrument, like, it takes 15 to 20 minutes to do anything and then operates over this like long 6-hour period.
Some people might not know this, but diabetes is considered a disability under the ADA, even if it's well managed because it limits the endocrine system. What are the risks? You've talked a little bit about the risks, but what happens if it's not well managed?
So what usually happens if people aren't well managed is their blood sugar is consistently high. The disease is sort of easier to manage if you just say like, you know what, I'm going to run high, right? I'm not going to give myself enough insulin. I'm going to run high. The long-term prognosis is very bad. So, for example, I've learned this now with, as we disseminate the game and we work with hospitals, like I'll work with hospitals in Chicago and they'll tell me, look, I'm a computer engineer. I'm married to a pediatrician. We're the diabetes management dream team. I go, how do the muggles do this? How do people, I don't understand. And what they'll explain to me is in certain populations, type 1 diabetes. So my daughter will, her life expectancy is actually longer if she's well managed. In, let's say, a poor neighborhood in Chicago with limited access to care and diabetes education, type 1 diabetes can be a death sentence in your 30s. What happens when you run blood sugar high for long periods of time? Blindness, kidney failure, organ failure. It's bad. It's really bad. If you're well managed, if you can keep in that range, your life expectancy is fine. But but the tricky part is if you're going to say, look, we want to stay in that healthy range, that means it's more likely you're going to go low, and low is short term dangerous. Low is you've got too much insulin in your system, not enough glucose, and your blood sugar will crash. You'll start getting dizzy within a few minutes. A few minutes later, you could fall unconscious. A few minutes after that, you can end up in a coma. So that's why you'll see diabetics always carrying around, candy or juice, because that's really the emergency scenario they need to deal with. That's also one of the main reasons for the ADA designation, because certain accommodations need to be made. You can't be told like, no, you can't bring food in here because you literally will need, that if your blood sugar drops, you might have 10 minutes to get glucose into your system before you have a real problem.
So, Sam, you mentioned the game, and you created this free mobile app. It's called Level One, a diabetes game, and the mission is to help others understand diabetes more. And I'm just curious where you got the idea for the game.
So uh, I'm very lucky. I've spent my career in the video games industry. So, I mean, I used to fly spaceships for Star Wars games at LucasArts. I I I made a company years ago that did games for all the big Hollywood movies. I've had a lot of fun. My last 10 years, I've been making games, 2 companies that make games for doctors. So I've actually been making medical games. And my daughter's diagnosis happened midway through this journey about 6 years ago. And so I've been making games for doctors, and then I was like, "Wait a minute. Basically, in this disease, like, you need this incredibly complex mental model of how this disease works. You have to, a normal human who's not a doctor needs to really understand insulin, glucose, digestion, metabolic dynamics to manage the disease. Games are the best way to do that. Games are the best way to develop a mental model of a complex system, whether it's, SimCity training your brain how a city works, or Angry Birds training your brain to predict the parabolic flight, of an anger, whatever that is. Games are the best way to learn. In fact, like I said, like I learned how to manage diabetes through play, right? Through trial and error. That was terrible. Instead, you should learn it from a video game. I mean, we even say, like, when you get a phone today, you don't read the manual. I don't even think they come with manuals anymore. They say, you know, I gotta play with this. I gotta play with this, right? That's how we learn, through play. But with type 1 diabetes, they literally just give you like a packet or a sheet of paper or a book. That's not, they'll train you 48 hours in the hospital when you're under like crazy amounts of stress and can't remember anything. So it's like, all right, we can fix this. We can fix this.
So you mentioned Star Wars, and you've also worked on other games like for Mission Impossible and more. But this also isn't your first health related app. You mentioned that you've also worked on other things. Is it true that you also made eye larynx to help your father and other doctors?
Yes. That's how I ended up in the whole medical gaming thing, was by accident. So I said, I've been making video games, played by hundreds of millions of people of various companies. Um, but I come from this family of doctors. So I was the, disgrace of the family who didn't go to medical school. And so in 2006, my dad gave up. And he said, "All right, Sam, put all this game nonsense to good use. Make me a game to train my colleagues to do a fiber optic intubation." He's an anesthesiologist, so it's this like tricky procedure they only do on difficult airways. And he says, "Can you make me a game to train people how to do this? I see people struggle with it if they haven't done enough cases, but just make me a game they can play on their phones. I don't want any big hardware. I don't want to drag anyone to a training center." So I was busy running this Hollywood game company. Out of guilt, I sat down for 3 weekends, made this game for my father, for his friends, so they could, do this procedure. And I didn't think about it again. And then 2 years later, I guess it was 2008, he calls me, "Hey, Sam, how many people downloaded the game?" I go, "Dad, I don't know how many of your friends downloaded your fiber optic laryngoscopy game, but I'll check for you." And I went on iTunes, and we had 100,000 doctors, nurses, and airway specialists who've been playing it. Like, by accident, we created this, like, incredibly popular, now look, it's not a game, I made games that played by tens of millions of people, but, like, 100,000 medical professionals, like, that hasn't been done. So I Googled it to try to understand how this happened, and I discovered, unbeknownst to me, they'd been doing efficacy studies at academic hospitals all over the world that showed this, like, eye larynx crappy game I made for my dad in 3 weekends was substantially improving physician performance. So that was the motivation. It wasn't like any grand, vision or idea. It was just like basically parental guilt. And then I made a thing, and it'd be, oh, okay, clearly there's demand for this. And similarly, like, I had no idea the need in the type 1 diabetes community until I realized it personally. And then it was like, wait a minute, hold on. No, no, no. We have the toolbox. We can fix this. We can make this much better. No parent should have to do this again.
Well, Sam, this is really important work that you've been doing. And I'm sure that in our audience, we have parents who have children with type 1 diabetes. So if they are interested, how can they get their hands on this app?
Oh, it's free. You can just go to playlevel1.com, levelone.com, or go to your favorite app store and just search for Level 1 Diabetes, and it'll pop up.
Awesome.
It's free. It's totally free. There's no, I there's no barrier to entry. You don't need a prescription. You can just download and play the game.
Well, that's extremely helpful. We'll include a link in the description. I'm also curious, personally, as someone who loves video games, what other video game are you a fan of? Do you have a favorite?
I'm right now addicted to particle puzzles. So I love games that involve physics. So I love games like Frost, Feed Me Oil. The new World of Goo just came out. I've just been playing the heck out of that game. I mean, now that I have, kids and less time to play on console and PC, I play a lot more on my phone.
Well, Sam, thank you for joining us today. I can only imagine the fear and anxiety that go along with type 1 diabetes, especially if you have a child with it. Do you have any closing thoughts you'd like to share with the audience?
I mean, the only closing thoughts that I would share is, coming from the video games industry, this is type 1 diabetes is not the only problem that looks like this. Meaning where, a caregiver or a patient, right, needs to develop and understanding a mental model of some kind of complex system, be it biological or whatever, or like how to manage the disease, how to manage the condition, what are the best practices. Games are the best way to do that. And so, I would just encourage you to engage with the video games industry, because I think there are a lot of people that are eager to solve these problems. And type 1 diabetes is not the only, call it, onboarding process to a new condition that could be drastically improved with a video game.
Thank you very much. And thank you again for joining us, Sam. This is Enable, the Disability Podcast. We are at Enable Podcast on social media. Please like, follow, and subscribe.
And please share this podcast with your friends and family so we can share more stories about people with different abilities that bring us all together. Thank you.